right, David, turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I get a nod. Is the sound working?
Yes,
All
it's
right,
working.
perfect. Thank you very much. My name is David Timony. I'm the chair of secondary education at Delaware Valley University.
Maybe why? Volume at two.
Here, are we good now?
We're good now. Sorry.
Oh, perfect. No trouble. No trouble. Thank you so much. My name is David Timony. I'm the chair of secondary education and associate professor of education at Delaware Valley University in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. My primary area of research is expertise in high level skill acquisition, and my particular interest in teacher expertise and teacher quality, and that relationship with student outcomes has been going on for several years. I also do a lot of work in other areas of expertise, such as chess at the K-12 level and at the international level, as well as work in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expertise. I wanted to talk to you today about my procedures and my process that I use for identifying, measuring, and recognizing expertise in education, particularly around teachers. Anybody who's been in the field for any length of time is familiar with the arbitrary and current measures of expertise and master teacher designation, all the way back to Kunin, and actually before that, his idea of with itness, which is a perfectly 70s word to use when discussing teacher quality. We move forward primarily with Berliner, but also his reference to Bullo about levels of skill, where you'll hear kind of terminology that is kind of head nodding terminology, right? Beginners, advanced beginners, more advanced teachers, and on their way towards master teacher. And it was David Berliner out in Arizona who coined the phrase expert teaching. We get into Schulman, who was referenced earlier, the concepts of content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and pedagogical content knowledge, and the interplay that those constructs have on quality teaching. By and large, in districts around the country, it is far more arbitrary measures, such as length of career. Someone will say, who are your master teachers? Who are your best teachers? And they'll say, oh, David's been here for 20 years. And there's some assumption that persistence in the workplace is somehow a determinant of advanced teaching skill and quality. We look at things like advanced degrees. Who's the best teacher? Well, so-and-so has a master's degree, or so-and-so has a terminal degree either in teaching, leadership, or their content area. Social nomination or social recognition. People are, they get awards for whatever it may be. They've earned tenure, or in some cases, they've hosted student teachers or intern teachers one or more times in their classrooms. And because of those kind of visual representations and social representations of teaching quality, they are recognized as advanced. What we fail to acknowledge many of the times here is, what is the effect of an expert? I like to think about going to a chess competition or going to a jiu-jitsu competition, and you have two international grandmasters, you have two black belts, advanced black belts in a martial art, and one of those people is going to lose. And what is your perception of the international grandmaster who loses in a chess competition? Well, clearly he or she is less the grandmaster than the winner. There's definitely something to be said about that. And for us to go into a classroom with a master teacher where the students are doing poorly, where the students' perceptions of that teacher are substandard, or where student effort is minimal. You'll say someone will have this opinion that they're a great teacher, but they can't get their students interested. They can't get their students to perform. Their students think they're terrible and boring. And you know what? Having been in the classroom for 25 years before I got into higher ed, maybe you're boring. And that's legitimate. Overall, these crazy measures of expertise that have no bearing on genuine outcomes. They have no practical nature to them other than the recognition. When we think about moving towards a meaningful measure of teacher expertise, my move is that we get practical about this. What's the purpose of being an expert? Would you rather be a really great quality educator, or would you rather have recognition as an expert? what function does expertise serve in our society, right? We understand in the realm of expertise that the expert is going to have particular brain architecture changes, having mastered a particular area. We hear about the idea of, rather than being a mild wide and an inch deep, to be very, very in depth. We all have heard this and talked about this in our doctoral programs, right? We want to dive deep and be an expert in a very narrow area, and that's helpful should anyone ever need our expertise in that narrow area. But what about someone in a classroom who's expected to have general expertise? What measures should be applied to that expert? What do you do about the expert teacher when you go observe their class and it's terrible? That students are sitting in the back, they're disengaged, they're not paying attention, they're not participating. My research begins with two suppositions. One is that students' perception of their teachers should be harvested for information well before their freshman year of college. I don't know what magical event happens from senior year of high school over the summer that suddenly this mid-adolescent has tremendous insight on the quality of teachers in their classrooms, right? But we all get handed out those bubble sheets at the end of the first semester, and the teacher sequesters themselves off to another room so you can fill in your sheets and turn in your recommendations, and they all come out about 3.75, 4.25. He really knows his stuff, but this class is boring. Both of which are meaningless to the person reading it, but those numbers will go into somebody's promotion portfolio. Students, according to the literature, who perceive their teachers to be credible, who perceive their teachers to be caring and connected, capable and competent, report better outcomes in the classroom. They report being more engaged, they report being more interested, and they report that they put in more effort, not if their teacher is an expert, but if they perceive their teacher to be an expert. And then overall, better outcomes are reported by the teachers as well. Which raises a pretty important question as to whether expertise is the necessity or the perception of expertise is the necessity. In my initial research into this, which is many, many years ago, but is continuing and refining, the way I began with this was to pull together a focus group in very targeted populations in the city of Philadelphia, where I live, to sit down with students and to get their opinions and their perceptions and their experiences about what an expert teacher does and what an expert teacher looks like, and what a novice teacher does and what they look like. But then also to kind of mine those students for how they change their behaviors and how they change their effort based on their perceptions of expertise and novice performance in the classroom. From that, I developed a questionnaire and asked adults and students alike to respond to these descriptive behaviors as to which of these behaviors would be demonstrated by an expert teacher and which of these behaviors would be demonstrated by a novice teacher, or maybe somebody in between. It was distributed to the entire school community. And what was really interesting about this survey is that these were established expertise and novice behaviors. It was amazing to me that in talking to students with no background in teacher competence or quality, the types of behaviors that they recognized expert and non-expert teachers performing were right in line with the literature. They were talking about teachers who are not dependent on the textbook, who are organized, who plan their lessons accordingly, as being more expert than not. They recognized teachers who were dependent on students for some level of affinity or some level of friendship rather than the appropriate relationships that one might have in a class. Now, I'm not suggesting inappropriate relationships, but the kind of childish buddy-buddiness that some teachers may demonstrate in a high school classroom. They recognized right away that when those teachers have that type of relational need among their students, that they could be easily manipulated, that they can put in less effort and then finesse a better grade at the end of the quarter. And the insight that these students brought with them was amazing, and it was critical, and it really sparked me to consider that not only are these definitions of expert and novice behaviors valuable, but that they may be situated in the sense that one school community or one geographic community may have a different set of expertise, behaviors, and expectations that another one has. So I've taken this on the road a little bit, and I'm finding that there are some commonalities, but there are definitely some, if nothing else, some definitions where the nomenclature changes, and some definitions where they are specific. So in a rural community, there are different sets of expectations just around the ground level types of behaviors that a teacher may need to demonstrate versus a city. But what I saw from the outcomes of the survey is that there was overwhelming agreement from students as to expert and novice behaviors. Now, a lot of that we could probably attribute to the fact that adolescents are going to be far more black and white in their definitions, right? In a 5-point scale, an adolescent is far more likely to rank something a 5 or a 1. But in discussing these behaviors with the administrators after they took their surveys, many of the administrators and even the faculty members were very non-committal, right? Even in behaviors that had qualifying factors, right? Overly strict, right? Overly, really telling us that the strict portion of this was inappropriate, was over the top. And it was the students who agreed that overly strict was really a novice behavior and didn't benefit the classroom. Whereas the faculty and the administrators all agreed it could be either or. It wasn't so much that they disagreed completely with the students, that it was ones where there were 5s and vice versa. It was that where a student would indicate an expert behavior as a 5 or a novice behavior as a 1, it was far more likely that the adults would rate many of the behaviors right down the middle. I actually had 2 faculty members from one school write 3 all the way down the entire page, and on the back they wrote a note and they said, "I promise I read every prompt and I think every behavior could be either or," which I thought was amazing. I thought was compelling in the sense that maybe the question that needs to be asked is, would you want to work with any of these people? Or would you want to hire any of these people? If you knew that folks were disorganized, if you knew that they were dependent on the textbook and couldn't answer student questions, if you knew that they felt a need to be friendly with the students rather than being the authority figure in the room with more appropriate relationships. In-class observations followed all of this because what I wanted to do is I wanted to explore, well, sure, we've got this list of behaviors, but are these behaviors that the students are referencing actually taking place in the classroom, right? So I took another educator with me, and we both sat in classrooms. We sat in 25 classrooms in one district and 25 classrooms in another. And there was a great deal of agreement among our counts of the frequency and intensity of these behaviors. Students identified behaviors that were consistently observed in classrooms, right? It supported this need to gather more meaningful information from the students and supported this interest in developing context-specific evaluations instead of standardized evaluations of teachers that are primarily exist in a vacuum. They don't often reflect actual practice or the impact of those actual practices. So my suggestion here is, rather than developing standardized evaluations, to maybe start to develop a standardized procedure for creating those types of evaluations. And I think that we can move towards a more meaningful measure of expertise by looking at how it impacts the outcomes for the students, the participation and the effort that the students report, and hopefully increased learning in the end. I'm more than happy to take questions, or we can move on. I'm sure there's probably questions for other folks if we don't have one more. I think we might have one. No, is that it? I'm going to stop sharing.